Thanks for tuning in. So today's conversation is going to be about contradictions and spiritual convictions. So just to set the tone, did you know that as a believer, it is your responsibility to encourage the walk of someone who might be new to faith, who might be old to faith, who just might be struggling with their faith? It's your responsibility as much as it is theirs to encourage their walk. Galatians 6:2 tells us to bear one another's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ. So essentially that, back to what I was saying about being able to encourage someone else's walk, those that we hold near and dear to us, and even those that we don't know, to be able to encourage them and build up their faith as you continue to build your own. With that being said, if you've ever witnessed or seen, anyone who falls in that category talk about their spiritual convictions on one end and then turn around and do something that contradicts the exact one thing they're trying to manage or that are struggling with, before you pass judgment, take a look at the full video and let's break down and understand why. And so, one of the main reasons that I'm able to confidently be able to share this testimony and this praise with you is that I've seen and went through this exact, moment of being spiritually convicted about my spirit telling me not to do certain things, and then I would turn around and fall right back into that sin. And so for me, just to be completely honest with you, because I don't like to hide or hold back anything and make any of, the testimony unrelatable, but my issue for a long time had been not being able to withstand, not having sex with my partners. And so, as a young lady, that's something that's very hard to admit to yourself, let alone to be able to tell somebody up front whenever you just get to meet them, like, hey, I like you a lot, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to have sex with you. 90% of guys are going to obviously turn away from that off rip. So it was a time in my life where for the last 4 years or so that I was struggling with trying to figure out, I feel the conviction, but I know what the world shows me. I know how to conform. It's a lot easier, I felt, to conform to what the world wants from me, to be able to have a successful relationship, to be able to not miss out on an opportunity to get to know somebody. I would suppress my own convictions. And, over time, that obviously didn't work out in my favor. And just to really go a little bit, deeper beyond that, it was definitely, college was a trying time for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of individuals who might be, on the same walk, meaning I've always known who Jesus was. I've always known who I was to call on, who was always going to be there, who the Savior was, who, did all those things for me and died for my sins. I've always known that as a child, being brought up in a really country area, the whole no pants to church, just skirts, purity hats, all that good stuff. I've been, I was raised up on all of those things. So it's not like I was just completely, oblivious to what I was doing wrong. But it was just the fact that I wanted to conform so much more to what the world had to offer that I was suppressing my own spiritual convictions. And that eventually led to me, getting to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. So just to, dive a little bit deeper for the women, it'll be certain times where you're going to have to break your own heart to keep your commitment to God. And what I mean by that is it'll be times where you might be in the best relationship of your life. The communication might be great. They might be physically fit. They might also be believers. But in that one area specifically, for me it was sex, but in that one area specifically, you just don't have that to offer to them. So rather than suppressing your own convictions and what you know to be true, you decide to give in to the want and the desire and the fantasy of having a relationship. But I'm here to tell you that doesn't last long, and that eventually will convict you to a place where you can't do it anymore. And for me personally, I was tired. I was tired of being convicted. I was tired of trying to get people to join me on my walk. I was tired of trying to convince myself that I could be strong and I could be celibate and still be in a relationship where I allowed my environment to really compromise that. And that could be anything from the point of really intimate settings like, late night watching movies at 12 a.m. Like, that's just not a good idea for me. But because I enjoyed the comfort of being in that place, I didn't deny it. And of course, that led to me once again, gave into the lust, gave into the conformities, and again, sabotage and compromise that commitment and that conviction that I know that God was telling me to do. And so, with that being said, a lot of times that I would get into a relationship, I would share that with that individual. I would let them know, like, hey, like, I want to try to do this. I've been doing, being celibate on my walk for a while now, and I want to keep that up if we're going to date. And I want you to be able to either be on board with that, and if you're not, just let me know. And of course, in the beginning, they're down. They're like, cool, I got it, she's respectable. But at the end of the day, if you invite yourself, it's not up to them. You being the woman, if you invite yourself into that environment, then you're allowing compromise. That has nothing to do with him. That's completely, on you, and that weight was on me. And so time after time, I would get into relationships. I would try to tell them, hey, from the beginning, so this isn't working for me. It's not working for me. This is something that I've been struggling with. And when you tell them that, you're being vulnerable in hopes that they're going to respect that. But understand that a human is just a human, and we all have the same needs and urges. So that's a lot of pressure to put on anybody. But so moving forward and not really, circling to the point of convictions and spiritual convictions and contradictions, I spiritually was convicted about having sex and not being married, or having sex and feeling just really, disgusted and weak in myself for not being able to have a successful relationship without that being in there. Now, mind you, people's battles are different. People's battles are completely different. But for me, I felt and I heard God calling me and telling me that this is your problem. This is what you need to do. So I spiritually felt the conviction, but I contradicted myself by allowing, what I wanted versus what he told me to do, and my obedience to really take precedence. So again, spiritual conviction, I felt it, but I contradicted myself. And with my friends watching, with even the person I'm involved with watching, they saw that too. They saw it too. They heard me say one thing, but then I went and did something else. And what they saw was a contradiction. So before you dismiss, me, and of course anyone who might be struggling with this, let's break down as to how that can be looked at differently. So, what I realized was that yes, I can acknowledge that, I was weak in that area, and I had definitely, weak moments where I wasn't able to make the right decisions or make wise decisions. But what that other person was able to see was my weakness. They saw my weakness, something that I had communicated, prior to the relationship. And just because it finally came to pass and they were able to see that, they automatically dismiss everything that I had, had planned to do as far as my commitment with. I started dismissing my commitment, and that was enough to really realize those relationships were not for me. If you're going to be in a relationship and you're going to practice celibacy, just, as an example, then you have to make sure that your partner from the beginning is on with that. And I don't mean by words, I don't just mean by actions. I need to know that, or you need to know that in some confidence and belief and prayer and sign from God that's where you are. He can handle it, or she can handle it, or y'all can handle that. But before you even get to that point, you have to realize, can you handle that? Can you handle being in a relationship and not allowing yourself to get in intimate settings? But again, this is taking a spin for a completely different conversation, so we will hold that topic for later on. But just as far as the contradiction goes, whenever you see someone that is a believer struggling, it's not your responsibility, or the last thing you should be doing rather is dismissing them and calling them a hypocrite or calling them a contradiction in faith. What you should be doing as a believer is taking their hand and pulling them and reminding them, hey, you made a commitment to God about this. You made a commitment. Keep your commitment. Be stronger than what your temptation is right now. But instead of doing that, the world today has taught us to, instead of extending a hand to bring them out of sin, we push them away and welcome them back into the arms of sin. So before you pass judgment on someone that is a believer and you see them struggling, help them. Reach out a hand to really help them and remind them of the commitment they made before you push them away into the sins, into the hands of where, God doesn't want them to be. And it's a hard thing to do for sure, but again, Galatians 6:2, build us all up in faith. We are here to help build and encourage each other on our walks, and we're all human. I don't like let's just kill the myth that believers aren't human. They have some sort of supernatural, powers that they're not going to be tried against the same thing as unbelievers, because that's not true. That's the exact purpose of a walk and a journey, is being able to conquer those things. So being a fellow believer, I do challenge you, moving forward in your life, to anytime you might see someone walking down a contradictory path, pull them aside and come to them as a believer, not as a Bible thumper, not as a minister, not as anything else you wouldn't want somebody coming to you about. And obviously make sure that y'all have that kind of relationship, to be honest, because, you know, people get offended very easily, and I was one of those ones. So make sure that it's a safe place to do that. Pull them aside and remind them of their commitment before you call them a hypocrite or contradiction. Because everybody has a struggle internally, and sometimes, or most times, you won't see that on the external. You won't see that struggle outright. It'll be something that they'll go home and have to deal with. Because, you know, thankfully for me, I was able to have people in my life who could help me to continue to overcome that, because it's still an ongoing battle even until this day. I'm just thankful that God placed the right people in my life at the right time, and I'll always be thankful for that. But, you know, again, moving forward, pull that sister or that brother aside and remind them, hey, you made a commitment to God, not to me, not to the world, not to this environment, but to God. And I'm not the one that you have to, you know, worry about passing judgment. My opinion doesn't matter. But when you go home and you lay your head at night, when you go to sleep, what's going to be heavy on your heart? Are you going to remember this and enjoying this pleasure more than you're going to remember and putting your commitment to God first? And that's it. You know, and leave it there. And obviously, like I said, make sure you have that kind of relationship with the person. Everybody just can't walk up to a stranger and be like, hey, God told you not to do this, so don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. Let's not get it, you know, misconstrued, and you just go around tapping strangers like, hey, no, that's not what I'm saying. Make sure that the environment is right and you have a trusting relationship with that person to be able to do something like that for them. And so, you know, moving forward, I really appreciate you guys for, you know, tuning in. I hope that you tune in for our next conversation, which is going to be more about the journey of being celibate and how being alone doesn't mean you're lonely. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Catch me later. Bye. Oh, also, if you have any questions and you want me to talk about any specific topics, feel free to, you know, leave me a message, comment, drop something on the Instagram page, DM it, whatever. All right, thanks guys, have a good